Looking at you makes my stomach turn. Do not think for 1 second this pregnancy is going to trap me. Get out of my house right now. DeAndre hurled my designer handbag through the grand entryway of our Buckhead mansion. It hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. The gold hardware scraped harshly against the custom imported stone. His eyes were completely black with rage and disgust. The charming facade he usually wore for the world had completely vanished. I did not cry. I did not scream or beg him to reconsider. I simply walked over and picked up my bag. I smoothed the wrinkles from my silk dress, looked him dead in the eye, and stepped out into the humid Atlanta night. He slammed the heavy mahogany door behind me so hard the glass panels rattled in their frames. I thought he had won. He thought he was discarding a dependent, helpless wife. He had no idea that in exactly 3 days he would be on his knees on that very same marble floor, tearing at his own hair and begging for a mercy I had entirely run out of. My name is Simone. I am 32 years old, and I am about to teach you a masterclass in the difference between flashy new money and quiet generational wealth. If you have ever been degraded by a man who mistook your silence for weakness, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. You will want to stay until the very end, because the trap I set for my husband and his greedy family is a lesson they will never forget. The absolute irony of my sudden eviction was that just 12 hours earlier, DeAndre was raising a crystal flute of imported champagne, declaring me the queen of his empire. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. DeAndre had insisted on hosting a lavish, over-the-top dinner party at our estate. He hired valet parkers, a private chef, and a string quartet that played classical arrangements of modern rhythm and blues hits. DeAndre always loved an audience. He works as a managing director at a prominent wealth management firm in the city. He caters to athletes, entertainers, and successful entrepreneurs. To him, image is everything. He built his entire personality around being the self-made king of Atlanta, and he needed everyone to believe that he single-handedly provided our luxurious lifestyle. I stood near the edge of our massive living room, sipping sparkling water and watching my husband perform. He was holding court near the fireplace, wearing a bespoke tailored suit that cost more than some people make in a month. He was laughing loudly, slapping his clients on the back and handing out expensive cigars. From the outside, we looked like the ultimate Black Power couple. We had the sprawling 6-bedroom house in the most exclusive zip code, the luxury vehicles in the driveway, and the perfect polished aesthetic. But sitting quietly in my purse was a small black and white ultrasound photo that was about to shatter that perfect illusion. DeAndre caught my eye across the room and waved me over. He wrapped a heavy arm around my waist, pulling me tightly against his side. "Everyone, I need you to raise a glass," he announced, his voice booming over the gentle music. "I want to toast to my beautiful wife, Simone. 5 years ago, I promised her I would give her the world. I promised her a castle, and look around us. We are standing in it. I took this quiet, simple girl and gave her a life most people only dream about. To Simone, the woman who gets to enjoy the fruits of my labor." The guests cheered and raised their glasses. I smiled softly and took a small sip of my water. I did not correct him. I did not mention that his narrative was a complete fabrication. DeAndre loved to play the savior. He loved the idea that he had rescued me from an ordinary life. I never bothered to burst his bubble because I was raised by a grandfather who believed that real wealth whispers, while fake wealth screams. My family made their fortune in commercial real estate and logistics 3 generations ago. I was taught never to flaunt my assets, never to discuss my net worth, and to keep my financial footprint completely invisible to the public eye. DeAndre paid the utility bills and leased his flashy cars, but he had absolutely no idea that the very house he was currently boasting about was owned by a private limited liability company. And that company was wholly owned by my family trust. I was his landlord, but he was too busy enjoying the sound of his own voice to ever read the fine print on the property deeds he bragged about. The party was in full swing when DeAndre's sister Tasha strutted over to me. Tasha was 33 years old, dripping in designer labels that I knew she could not afford on her salary as a part-time event coordinator. Her husband Jamal trailed behind her like an obedient shadow. Jamal was 36 and constantly pitching failed business ideas to DeAndre, hoping for a handout. "Well, look at you," Tasha sneered, looking me up and down. Her eyes landed on my simple, elegant dress. "You would think for your 5th anniversary, You would try to look a little more glamorous. DeAndre is out here looking like $1 million, and you look like you are going to a parent-teacher conference. You need to step it up, Simone. My brother is a high-value man. There are plenty of women in Atlanta who would kill to be in your shoes and live in this house. Jamal chuckled, swirling the ice in his glass. Tasha is just looking out for you, Simone. DeAndre is moving up in the world. He needs a wife who can keep up with his image. You are lucky he is so loyal. A lot of guys in his tax bracket would have traded up by now. I maintained my pleasant expression, refusing to give them the reaction they desperately wanted. I appreciate your concern, Tasha, I said evenly. But DeAndre and I are perfectly happy with how things are. Besides, true value does not need to be wrapped in a brand name to be recognized. Tasha rolled her eyes and scoffed. Whatever you say, just remember who pays for the roof over your head. You should be worshipping the ground my brother walks on. She turned on her heel and walked away, Jamal following closely behind. I watched them gravitate toward the open bar, helping themselves to top-shelf liquor, paid for by the very trust fund they thought I lacked. Tasha had always despised me. She thought I was boring and plain. She constantly fed DeAndre's ego, reminding him how incredible he was, and subtly hinting that he could do better than a quiet woman who preferred reading over attending VIP club nights. I used to think her hostility was just typical sister-in-law jealousy. I had no idea that her venom was part of a much darker, much more sinister plot to replace me entirely. As the evening wore on, the caterers began clearing the dinner plates. The guests moved out to the patio to enjoy the mild evening air. I slipped away from the crowd and retreated to the kitchen for a moment of quiet. I placed my hand over my lower abdomen, feeling a sudden surge of protective warmth. I was 8 weeks pregnant. We had not been actively trying to have a baby, but we had not been preventing it either. DeAndre had always talked about wanting an heir son to carry on his self-made legacy. He would talk endlessly about buying his future son a tiny matching Rolex and taking him to courtside basketball games. I thought this news would be the ultimate anniversary gift. I thought it would ground him, pull him away from his obsession with his public image, and focus his attention back on our marriage. I took a deep breath and pulled the ultrasound photo from my purse. The small, blurry shape on the paper represented a massive shift in our lives. I wanted to tell him tonight after the guests left in the quiet intimacy of our home. I wanted to see his face light up with genuine joy, not the manufactured charm he performed for his clients. DeAndre walked into the kitchen, checking his reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. He adjusted his tie and let out a long sigh of satisfaction. "This party is a massive success," he said, not bothering to look at me. "Did you see the way the investors were looking at the new pool house? I am definitely closing those portfolio accounts next week. This house is the best investment I ever made. It proves I am in the big leagues." "It is a beautiful house," I agreed softly. "DeAndre, do you have a minute? I have something I want to give you. It is your real anniversary present." He checked his luxury watch and frowned. "Can it wait, Simone? I need to get back out there. Shayla just arrived and Tasha wants me to introduce her to some of the single executives." The mention of Shayla made a brief ripple of annoyance pass through me. Shayla was Tasha's best friend, a woman who seemed to be entirely funded by mystery sponsors. She was always lingering around family events, laughing a little too loudly at DeAndre's jokes and touching his arm a little too frequently. I had brushed it off as harmless flirting, trusting my husband to maintain boundaries. "It will only take a second," I insisted, stepping closer to him. I held out the small envelope containing the ultrasound. DeAndre snatched it from my hand with an exasperated sigh. "What is this?" "A gift card. Simone, I told you I do not need anything. I provide everything." He ripped the envelope open and pulled out the glossy photo. For a moment, the kitchen was completely silent. The faint sound of the string quartet drifted in from the patio, but the air between us suddenly grew heavy and suffocating. DeAndre stared at the image. I watched his face, waiting for the recognition, waiting for the joy to break through his arrogant facade. Instead, his features twisted into a mask of pure horror. The color drained from his face, and his jaw tightened so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. He looked from the photo to my stomach and then up to my eyes. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper. It is our baby, DeAndre. I am pregnant. We are going to be parents. I expected shock. I even expected a moment of panic. What I did not expect was the look of absolute unadulterated disgust that washed over his face. He dropped the ultrasound photo onto the marble kitchen island, as if it were contaminated. Are you out of your mind? He hissed, stepping toward me aggressively. A baby, now. I am at the peak of my career. I am expanding my network. I am building a brand based on luxury and freedom. How am I supposed to maintain my image with a screaming infant and a wife waddling around in maternity clothes? This ruins everything. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind suddenly became dangerously clear. The man standing in front of me was not the husband I thought I knew. He was a monster who viewed me solely as an accessory. And as he continued to hurl insults, preparing to kick me out of my own home, a cold, calculating silence settled over me. I was about to show him exactly what happens when you discard a woman who holds the keys to your entire kingdom. Get your things and get out, DeAndre commanded, snapping his fingers toward the grand hallway. I want you gone by midnight. Tasha smirked from the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. You heard him, Simone. A king needs his space. Do not let the door hit you on the way out. I did not waste my breath arguing. I walked upstairs to the master suite, pulled a leather duffel bag from the back of the closet, and packed exactly 3 changes of clothes, my laptop and my passport. I left the diamond tennis bracelets. I left the designer heels. I left every single item DeAndre had purchased with his credit cards to make me look like a suitable trophy for his brand. I zipped the bag and walked back down the sweeping staircase. DeAndre was standing by the front door with his chest puffed out. Tasha and Jamal were practically vibrating with glee, eager to watch my downfall. Leave the keys to the Range Rover on the console, DeAndre ordered, pointing a finger at the marble table. You can call a cab. I reached into my bag, pulled out the heavy brass house keys and the car fob, and placed them gently on the cool stone surface. I did not shed a single tear. I looked at the 3 of them, a pack of fools celebrating their own impending doom, and I simply nodded. Keep the house, DeAndre, I said evenly. I stepped out into the humid Atlanta night. A sleek black town car was already waiting at the curb. I had summoned my private driver the moment DeAndre began his tantrum in the kitchen. I slid into the back seat, instructed the driver to head downtown, and watched the Buckhead mansion fade into the distance. Day 2 began as the sun rose over the Atlanta skyline. I sat on the balcony of my private penthouse in Midtown. DeAndre knew absolutely nothing about this property. It was a 4,000 square foot sanctuary, occupying the entire top floor of a high-rise purchased in cash by my grandfather long before DeAndre and I ever met. The title was hidden behind 3 layers of corporate shielding. To my husband, I was just a quiet woman who occasionally worked freelance administrative jobs. He had no idea that I was the sole managing heir to the Sterling Vanguard Trust, a massive real estate and logistics empire that practically built half of the commercial districts in this city. I walked back inside the cool air conditioning, a sharp contrast to the morning heat. I poured a cup of black coffee and settled into my home office. This room was not decorated with flashy magazine covers or cheap glass trophies. It featured 4 high-definition monitors, a secure encrypted server connection, and a direct line to my family legal team. I placed my finger on the biometric scanner and logged into the master portal of my trust. For 5 years, I had allowed DeAndre to believe he was a self-made financial genius. When we got married, I instructed my wealth managers to quietly route a portion of our lower-tier asset portfolios through his firm. We disguised the accounts using shell companies. Those accounts generated massive commissions for him, earning him his promotions and inflating his ego. I even structured the ownership of the Buckhead mansion under a proxy LLC so he could claim he bought it. He paid a nominal monthly lease to the company, completely unaware that his rent money was going straight into my trust fund. I had built his entire kingdom from the shadows simply because I loved him and wanted him to feel like the ultimate provider. But love was dead now. All that remained was accounting. I opened the financial ledger for the LLC that managed the Buckhead property and the associated operational accounts. I needed to begin the process of severing DeAndre from my assets. But as I ran a routine sweep of the transaction histories from the past 12 months, a red flag appeared on my screen. The system detected a series of irregular capital transfers originating from the secondary accounts I had given him access to. I leaned closer to the monitor. My eyes scanned the rows of data. $10,000 here, $25,000 there. The withdrawals were meticulously staggered to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. They were labeled as business development expenses, contractor fees, and consulting retainers. I highlighted the transactions and commanded the software to aggregate the total sum. The number flashed on the screen in stark, unforgiving digits: $400,000. DeAndre had siphoned $400,000 of my money over the past year. My chest tightened, not with sorrow, but with a lethal, icy rage. He had not just insulted me. He had not just discarded his pregnant wife. He had reached his greedy hands into my family wealth. He was stealing from the very empire my grandfather had bled to build. I set my coffee mug down. The emotional wife who wanted to surprise her husband with a baby was gone. The calculating, ruthless heir had taken the wheel. I began tracing the routing numbers attached to the fraudulent withdrawals. DeAndre was arrogant, but he was also sloppy. He thought he was untouchable. He assumed I was too naive to ever check the financial plumbing of our marriage. The first major chunk of money, roughly $150,000, had been wired directly to a luxury automotive dealership in Sandy Springs. I pulled up the bill of sale using my back-end access. The purchase was a brand new Porsche Cayenne. The registered owner was not DeAndre. The name on the title was Shayla. I stared at the name. Shayla, Tasha's best friend. The woman DeAndre claimed was a boss who matched his energy. The woman Tasha paraded around our anniversary party. DeAndre had not just been sleeping with her. He had bought her a luxury vehicle using my money. I clicked on the next set of transfers. $250,000 had been funneled into a commercial real estate lease and a series of equipment purchases. I ran a cross-reference on the property address. It was a high-end retail space in a newly developed outdoor shopping district. The registered business name was Shayla Aesthetics, a luxury medical spa. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with sickening clarity. Jamal's comments about Shayla securing her own med spa location echoed in my mind. Tasha's constant praise of her best friend's business acumen. They all knew. They had all been laughing at me. DeAndre was funding his mistress's entire entrepreneurial dream using the wealth I secretly provided. Tasha and Jamal were cheering him on, likely benefiting from the arrangement themselves. They thought I was a blind, submissive fool underwriting their glamorous lifestyle. They had staged that entire confrontation in the home office. They knew DeAndre was planning to divorce me. They wanted me out of the house so Shayla could move in and take my place as the queen of the Buckhead mansion. They thought they had executed the perfect coup. I continued to dig deeper into the LLC's operational expenses. My fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing vendor payments and maintenance fees for the Buckhead property. DeAndre had been charging phantom expenses to the house. He submitted invoices for landscaping and renovations that never occurred, redirecting the money into a separate checking account. The audacity was staggering. I was draining the very entity that put a roof over his head. I opened a separate tab and pulled up the financial records for the townhouse where his sister Tasha lived. 3 years ago, DeAndre came to me begging for a favor. He claimed Tasha and Jamal were going through a rough patch and needed a place to stay. I quietly authorized the trust to purchase a luxury townhouse in Midtown, allowing them to live there rent-free while they got on their feet. DeAndre took all the credit, telling his family that his brilliant investments had secured the property. For 3 years, I paid the property taxes and the homeowners association fees, while Tasha strutted around Atlanta acting like a wealthy socialite. She lived in a home I provided, yet she had the nerve to stand in my office and call me a freeloader. The sheer level of disrespect was almost poetic. I compiled the townhouse deed and the payment history into a new digital folder labeled eviction. Tasha was going to learn a very hard lesson about biting the hand that feeds you. Jamal's arrogance would vanish the moment he realized his comfortable, rent-free existence was entirely dependent on the woman he mocked. They wanted me to face the real world. I was going to gladly introduce them to it. I reviewed the final sum of the embezzled funds. The $400,000 was a fraction of my overall net worth, a drop in the ocean of my family's generational wealth. But it was the principle of the theft that demanded absolute retribution. My ancestors had faced unimaginable hardships to build this empire. They had endured redlining discrimination and economic sabotage to secure these assets. I was not going to let a deceitful, image-obsessed man and his greedy mistress squander our legacy on leased sports cars and cosmetic businesses. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram. I navigated to Shayla's public profile. There it was posted just 2 hours ago. A picture of Shayla leaning against a gleaming white Porsche Cayenne, holding up a set of keys. The caption read, "When a real king recognizes his queen. Blessed and highly favored." I scrolled down to the comments. Tasha had commented right at the top. "So proud of you, bestie. You deserve it all. Glad the dead weight is finally gone." Jamal had replied with fire emojis. I did not type a response. I did not screenshot the post to send angry messages. I closed the application and set the phone face down on the desk. Let them have their morning of victory. Let them enjoy the high of their perceived success. It would make the crash that much more devastating. Grand larceny. That was the legal definition of what DeAndre had committed. He had abused his authorized user status on the secondary trust accounts to embezzle funds. In the state of Georgia, stealing $400,000 was a felony that carried significant prison time. But putting him in jail was too simple. It was too fast. I wanted to dismantle his entire reality piece by piece. I wanted him to feel the exact moment his fake kingdom crumbled to dust. I needed to mobilize my legal team. I pressed a button on my secure encrypted phone line. It dialed the direct extension for Vivian Sterling. Vivian was the senior partner at Atlanta's most fearsome corporate law firm. She was 60 years old, sharp as shattered glass, and had protected my family trust for 2 decades. She did not lose cases, and she certainly did not tolerate thieves. The line clicked open after 2 rings. "Good morning, Simone Vivienne," said her voice crisp and alert. "I did not expect to hear from you the day after your anniversary party. I hope the event was satisfactory." "Good morning, Vivian," I replied, my tone strictly business. "The event was highly educational. I need to initiate a full forensic audit of all accounts associated with DeAndre. I also need you to prepare an immediate revocation of his authorized access to the secondary trust portfolios." I heard the swift clacking of a keyboard on Vivian's end. "Consider it done." "Has there been a breach?" "Yes," I stated coldly. "My husband is requesting a divorce. Furthermore, I have just uncovered unauthorized transfers totaling $400,000 over the last 12 months. The funds were embezzled to purchase a luxury vehicle and fund a commercial lease for his mistress." The silence on the line was brief but heavy. When Vivian spoke again, her voice had dropped an octave, carrying the lethal weight of a seasoned predator preparing for the hunt. "I see," Vivian murmured. "He has made a very grave miscalculation. I will freeze all linked assets immediately." "Do you want me to contact the authorities regarding the embezzlement?" "Not yet," I instructed. "I want to build an airtight cage first. I want every single transaction mapped. I want the commercial lease for that medical spa scrutinized. If my funds were used to secure the property, I want to know if we can seize the business assets. And Vivian, I want the eviction papers drafted for the townhouse Tasha and Jamal are currently occupying. They are co-conspirators in this theft." Vivian let out a low, approving hum. "I will have the emergency injunctions ready for your signature by noon. We will strip him down to his shoelaces, Simone." "Thank you, Vivian. I will be at your office at 1 o'clock. I ended the call and looked back at my glowing monitors. The financial web connecting DeAndre to my wealth was vast, but it was fragile. He had mistaken my quiet humility for weakness. He had looked at my simple dresses and assumed I lacked power. He had looked at my pregnancy and called it disgusting. I placed my hand gently over my stomach once again. I was not just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting my child's legacy. Nobody steals from this family and walks away with a smile. I spent the next few hours compiling every piece of digital evidence, downloading bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and ownership documents. I built a fortress of undeniable proof. DeAndre was currently waking up in the Buckhead mansion, likely patting himself on the back for executing a flawless eviction. He had no clue that the ground beneath his feet was already gone. I closed the primary ledger and opened a secondary monitoring software my grandfather's security team had installed on all proxy properties. This system allowed me to view the perimeter cameras and interior common area feeds of the Buckhead mansion. I had never used it to spy on my husband. I valued trust, but trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. I clicked on the living room feed. The pristine marble floors were littered with empty champagne glasses from the night before. But DeAndre was not alone. Tasha and Shayla were already there lounging on my custom-imported Italian leather sofas. I watched through the high-definition feed as Shayla strutted around my living room, wearing one of DeAndre's oversized dress shirts. The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 12 hours after my husband had violently ordered his pregnant wife out of her own home, his mistress was already playing house. I tapped the record button, saving the video files directly to the secure cloud folder I had created for Vivian. Let them make themselves comfortable. They were simply decorating their own crime scene. My phone buzzed on the desk. An alert from a burner social media account I kept for market research notified me that Tasha had just gone live on Instagram. I pulled up the broadcast and propped the phone against my monitor. Tasha was holding her phone high, capturing Shayla twirling in the center of my grand foyer. "Welcome to the new era," Tasha announced to her hundreds of followers, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. My brother finally upgraded. We are out with the old boring broke energy and in with the new boss energy. Shayla blew a kiss to the camera and jingled the keys to the Porsche Cayenne I had unwittingly paid for. She walked toward the grand staircase and began ascending to the master suite. "Let us go see what the former tenant left behind." Shayla laughed, her voice grating through my phone speaker. Tasha followed her, flipping the camera to show the heavy mahogany doors of my bedroom. They threw the doors open and marched straight into my walk-in closet. "Look at this sad collection," Tasha sneered, pulling one of my simple linen dresses off its velvet hanger. No wonder DeAndre was so miserable. The woman dressed like a substitute teacher. Shayla grabbed a handful of the sensible flats I preferred to wear and tossed them onto the floor. "Do not worry, Tasha. We are clearing all this trash out today. I am moving my seasonal wardrobe in by tomorrow." DeAndre said he is hiring a decorator to completely redo this room. He wants it to reflect a real power couple. I watched them rummage through my intimate spaces. Most women would be sobbing, screaming at the screen, or driving back to the house to physically throw these trespassers out. I felt absolutely nothing but a clinical, detached fascination. They were so confident in their stolen victory. They were celebrating a lifestyle built entirely on a foundation of sand. Every disrespectful comment, every tossed shoe, every arrogant laugh was just another piece of evidence I would use to mentally break them. I took screenshots of the live stream capturing the exact moments Shayla bragged about moving in and DeAndre funding her entire life. She was proudly confessing to receiving embezzled funds on a public platform. The prosecution would not even need to work hard for a conviction. These women were handing over the murder weapon with their fingerprints all over it. I opened another tab on my workstation to trace the exact routing of the stolen $400,000. I needed to see exactly how DeAndre had structured the fraud. He had created a fake vendor profile in my limited liability company portal. He labeled it as a commercial real estate consulting firm. Over the past 12 months, he had been submitting fraudulent invoices for property appraisals and market research that never existed. My wealth managers had blindly approved the invoices because DeAndre was listed as a trusted, authorized user. The funds were routed to a shell bank account he controlled, which then funneled the cash into Shayla's medical spa business. He had effectively used my generational wealth as his personal venture capital fund to impress his mistress. He bought her loyalty with my grandfather's money. He bought his sister's praise by letting her live rent-free in my midtown townhouse. He was a complete parasite. The sheer scale of his audacity eradicated any lingering trace of affection I might have held for the man I married. While the live stream continued to play on my phone, a text message popped up on the screen. It was from DeAndre. I opened the message, my face a mask of stone. "I am having my assistant box up whatever garbage you left in the closet," the text read. "You can pick it up from the security gate at 3 o'clock. Do not try to come inside. My lawyer will be sending over the divorce papers by the end of the week, I am offering you a $5,000 settlement to walk away quietly and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Take the money, Simone. It is more than you brought into this marriage. If you try to fight me, I will drag this out in court and leave you with nothing. You know I have the capital to crush you. I stared at the glowing screen. $5,000. He had stolen $400,000 from my family. Trust bought his mistress a luxury vehicle, funded a commercial business, and he believed a $5,000 hush money offer would make me disappear. He honestly believed he possessed the capital to crush me. The delusion was staggering. I did not reply. Silence is a weapon that narcissists cannot comprehend. By ignoring him, I was denying him the conflict he craved. He wanted me to beg. He wanted me to fight so he could flex his perceived dominance. My silence would only feed his arrogance, ensuring he remained completely blind to the guillotine swinging down toward his neck. I turned off the monitors and walked into the master bathroom of my penthouse. The woman who had played the role of the quiet, unassuming suburban wife was officially dead. I stepped into the glass-enclosed rainfall shower, letting the scalding water wash away the last traces of DeAndre's disrespect. I was pregnant, betrayed, and discarded, but I had never felt more powerful. I stepped out, dried off, and walked into my true closet. This was not the closet of a substitute teacher. This was the wardrobe of a billionaire heiress. I bypassed the flashy logo-heavy brands that Tasha and Shayla worshipped. Those brands were for people desperate to prove they had money. I selected a bespoke tailored charcoal suit crafted from Italian wool. I paired it with a crisp white silk blouse and classic black stiletto heels. I fastened a vintage Cartier watch around my wrist, a subtle heirloom passed down from my grandmother. This was stealth wealth, the kind of power that does not need to scream for attention because it owns the entire building. I applied minimal, flawless makeup and pulled my hair back into a sleek, unforgiving bun. I looked in the mirror. There was no warmth left in my eyes. The empathy had been surgically removed. I placed my hand gently over my flat stomach. DeAndre had called this baby a liability. He had called my pregnancy a disgusting trap. I was going to make sure that the child growing inside me would inherit an empire completely cleansed of its parasites. I picked up my leather briefcase containing the printed financial ledgers, the security footage, and the digital screenshots of Shayla and Tasha's public confessions. I locked the penthouse and rode the private elevator down to the underground parking garage. My driver was standing beside a pristine black SUV holding the door open for me. "Take me to the Sterling law firm," I instructed, my voice echoing in the quiet garage. As the SUV navigated through the bustling streets of Buckhead, passing the very restaurants and country clubs where DeAndre loved to flaunt his fake status, I reflected on the lessons my grandfather taught me. He built his wealth during a time when black men were rarely allowed a seat at the table. He bought land, held onto it with an iron grip, and created trusts that shielded our family from economic predators. He always warned me that new money is loud and insecure, while old money is quiet and observant. DeAndre was the loudest man in every room. He worshipped the aesthetic of wealth without understanding the discipline required to maintain it. He thought wealth was defined by VIP tables and leased sports cars. He had no concept of land deeds, corporate shielding, or irrevocable trusts. He mistook my humility for a lack of ambition, completely oblivious to the fact that true power never needs to announce its presence. I leaned back against the plush leather seat of the SUV, feeling a profound sense of peace. I was not a victim seeking revenge. I was a sovereign protecting her territory. The car pulled up to the towering glass and steel skyscraper that housed Vivian Sterling's practice. I stepped out onto the pavement, the midday sun beating down on my shoulders. I walked through the revolving doors with the posture of an executioner. The preparation was over. I had gathered the rope, tied the knot, and built the scaffold. It was time to hand the lever to my legal team and watch my husband hang himself. The receptionist at Sterling Law Firm did not ask for my name. She simply stood up, smoothed her tailored skirt, and escorted me directly to the corner suite on the 50th floor. Vivian Sterling was waiting for me. Her office was a masterpiece of minimalist intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline, a physical reminder of the power her firm wielded over the city. Vivian sat behind a massive slab of black obsidian that served as her desk. She wore a pristine white suit, her silver hair cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her hawkish features. She did not offer me a sympathetic smile or a cup of tea. She operated on absolute efficiency. "Have a seat," Simone Vivienne commanded, gesturing to the leather chair opposite her. "I have already initiated the lockdown protocols on the secondary accounts. Your grandfather built the trust with multiple fail-safes for situations exactly like this. DeAndre is currently locked out of the primary liquidity pools, though he will not realize it until he attempts to initiate a transfer or swipe his premium cards." I handed her the encrypted flash drive containing the morning's digital harvest. "This drive holds the ledger, tracing the $400,000 he siphoned over the last year," I explained, keeping my posture rigid. I also included the deed to the Midtown townhouse where his sister Tasha resides, along with video and photographic evidence of DeAndre moving his mistress into the Buckhead property this morning. His mistress Shayla publicly admitted on a live broadcast that DeAndre is funding her lifestyle and her new medical spa. Vivienne plugged the drive into her terminal. Her eyes darted across the screen as she rapidly processed the data. A slow, chilling smirk touched the corners of her mouth. He used the LLC portal to submit fake invoices for commercial real estate consulting. She noted, her tone dripping with professional disgust. Sloppy, extremely sloppy. He routed the funds through a vulnerable shell account. "I can have these assets seized before lunchtime. We can legally confiscate the Porsche and place a lien on the medical spa equipment since they were purchased with stolen trust funds." "That is a good start," I said. "I want Tasha and her husband evicted immediately. They were completely complicit in this." Tasha stood in my office and called me a freeloader while living in a property my family owns. Vivian tapped a manicured fingernail against her obsidian desk. "I have already drafted the 24-hour emergency eviction notice. Fraudulent occupation and breach of trust. The sheriffs will be at their door tomorrow to drag their furniture onto the sidewalk." "But Simone, the $400,000 and the arrogant sister are the least of your concerns right now." I frowned, leaning forward. "What do you mean?" Vivienne turned her primary monitor to face me. "While you were gathering the petty cash receipts, my forensic accounting team was running a deep sweep of the Buckhead property title. We needed to ensure the LLC barrier remained intact before we filed the divorce injunction. We found a massive anomaly, one that escalates this situation from a messy civil divorce into a federal criminal investigation." She pulled a thick manila folder from her drawer and slid it across the desk. "Open it." I opened the folder. Inside was a commercial loan agreement stamped by a major national bank. The loan amount was $2 million. The collateral listed for the loan was the Buckhead mansion. I stared at the paperwork, my mind racing to comprehend the numbers. "This makes no sense," I said, my voice tight. "The mansion is owned by the Proxy LLC. I am the sole managing director of that LLC. DeAndre is only listed as an authorized tenant. He does not have the legal authority to leverage this property for a loan." "Look at the signature page," Vivian instructed. I flipped to the last page of the document. There, perfectly mimicking my handwriting, was my signature. Below it was DeAndre's signature, listed as a co-signer. The document bore the official stamp of a notary public. "He forged my signature," I whispered, the sheer magnitude of his betrayal washing over me. "He forged my signature to take out a $2 million loan against my family's property." Vivienne nodded, her eyes dark with predatory anticipation. "He did. And he used a notary who works at his wealth management firm to rubber stamp the documents. The bank approved the commercial loan because DeAndre leveraged his professional reputation and his position at his firm to bypass the standard underwriting protocols. He effectively committed identity theft, bank fraud, and federal mortgage fraud in one single stroke." My chest heaved as I processed the information. The $400,000 he stole for Shayla was just pocket change. It was a distraction. He had secretly saddled my company with a $2 million debt. What did he do with the money? Vivian tapped a few keys and brought up a wire transfer receipt. He dumped the entire $2 million into a highly volatile commercial real estate venture in Dubai. It is a high-risk, high-reward development project managed by one of his sleazy fraternity brothers. DeAndre is obsessed with the idea of becoming a self-made billionaire. I wanted to leap from wealth manager to global real estate tycoon overnight. He gambled your family's money on a pipe dream, assuming he would double his investment, pay off the loan before you ever noticed, and walk away a king. The absolute arrogance. He kicked me out of the house, calling me a liability, while he was secretly committing federal crimes to fund his delusions of grandeur. He thought my pregnancy was going to ruin his image, but he had already signed his own death warrant. "We have him," Vivian said, folding her hands together. "We have him dead to rights. If we report this to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service, he will be facing a minimum of 10 to 15 years in federal prison. His wealth management career will be obliterated instantly. His firm will fire him to avoid association with federal mortgage fraud. He will lose his licenses, his reputation, and his freedom." I stared at the forged signature on the loan document. DeAndre had always believed he was the smartest person in the room. He believed my silence was a sign of ignorance. He thought I was just a quiet girl who enjoyed baking and reading, completely unaware of the ruthless corporate instincts flowing through my veins. He had forgotten that my grandfather built our empire by crushing men exactly like him. "Vivienne," I said, my voice echoing with absolute authority. "How quickly can we drop the hammer?" Vivienne smiled, a terrifying expression that promised total destruction. "We control the timeline, Simone. We can alert the authorities right now and have him arrested at his office. But you mentioned he was hosting a celebration." I nodded, the pieces of the ultimate trap snapping together in my mind. "Yes, tomorrow night, he is hosting a massive catered event at the Buckhead mansion. He told his clients it was our 5th anniversary party, but I overheard him telling Tasha he is using the event to secure new investors and to officially debut Shayla to his circle. He thinks I am hiding in a cheap motel, crying over our broken marriage. He plans to parade his mistress through my house, drink my champagne, and celebrate the $2 million investment he secured through fraud." Perfect, Vivian purred. "We let him host his party. We let him gather all of his wealthy clients, his fraternity brothers, and his enablers into one room. He wants an audience. We will give him a show." I sat back in my chair, the strategy forming with flawless precision. "First, we revoke his access to all bank accounts tomorrow afternoon, just hours before the party begins. I want his black card to decline when he tries to pay the catering staff. I want him sweating." Vivienne jotted down notes on her legal pad. "Done. I will coordinate with the bank managers. The accounts will be frozen for suspicious activity." "Second," I continued, "we send the repo men to collect the cars. I want the tow trucks rolling up the driveway right in the middle of his grand speech. Shayla loves that Porsche. I want her to watch it get dragged down the street while she stands there in her designer gown." Vivienne nodded. "I will dispatch the recovery team. They will have the legal authority to repossess the vehicles based on the fraudulent funds used to purchase them." And finally, I said, locking eyes with Vivienne, "We do not just send the police, we bring the federal agents. I want the mortgage fraud task force walking through those custom mahogany doors. I want the eviction notices served to Tasha and Jamal at the exact same moment DeAndre is placed in handcuffs. I want his entire support system to collapse simultaneously so they cannot help each other." Vivienne closed her legal pad and folded her hands on the obsidian desk. "A perfectly synchronized financial execution. It is brutal, Simone. It leaves absolutely no room for recovery." "He left no room for mercy," I replied coldly. "He looked at the ultrasound of his child and called it a mistake. He ordered me out of my home into the humid night. He brought his mistress into my bed. He deserves every single ounce of the destruction coming his way." Vivienne stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "The trap is officially set. Go back to your penthouse, Simone. Rest. Eat something nourishing for the baby. By tomorrow night, DeAndre will be stripped of his title, his money, and his freedom. You just sit back and watch the fireworks." I stood up, adjusting the lapels of my charcoal suit. I shook Vivienne's hand. It was not a handshake of a distraught wife. It was the handshake of a CEO closing a hostile takeover. I walked out of the corner suite, the thick carpet silencing my footsteps. I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my reflection in the polished steel doors looking back at me. I was no longer the supportive wife living in the shadow of a loud man. I was the architect of his demise. DeAndre wanted to play a high-stakes game of wealth and power. He wanted to be the king of Atlanta, But he had fundamentally misunderstood the rules of the board. He thought he was playing chess, moving pawns and knights to secure his position. He did not realize that I owned the board, the pieces, and the table they sat on. I stepped out into the blinding Atlanta sunlight, signaling my driver to pull the SUV around. The countdown had officially begun. 48 hours remaining until the empire he stole came crashing down on his head. I instructed my driver to head back to Midtown. I needed to ensure every digital tripwire was perfectly calibrated. There would be no escape routes. There would be no negotiations. DeAndre was going to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Never try to steal a crown from a woman who owns the entire kingdom. I returned to the Midtown penthouse just as the late afternoon sun began to cast long golden shadows across the Atlanta skyline. The sprawling city below me buzzed with the frantic energy of millions of people chasing success, chasing money, and chasing validation. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the urban canopy. Somewhere down there in the affluent neighborhoods of Buckhead, my husband was currently orchestrating his grand debut as a self-made mogul. I was likely pacing the hardwood floors of the mansion I owned, barking orders at caterers and event planners preparing to introduce his mistress to the upper echelons of society. He felt invincible. He felt like a king. I walked away from the window and settled into the ergonomic chair in my home office. The time for observation had officially passed. It was time to sever the arteries of his financial life support. I woke up my encrypted workstation and immediately launched a secure video conference link. Vivian Sterling appeared on my primary monitor just seconds later. She was sitting in her office, flanked by two men in immaculate dark suits. "Good afternoon, Simone Vivienne," said her voice crisp and echoing with absolute authority. "Allow me to introduce Arthur Sterling, my senior partner, specializing in federal financial crimes, and David Vance, the lead director of your private wealth management syndicate. We are fully prepared to execute the asset severance and report the fraudulent activities." "Good afternoon, gentlemen," I replied, my tone mirroring Vivian's clinical detachment. "Let us not waste any time. I want the financial guillotine dropped immediately." David Vance leaned forward. He had managed my family's trust portfolios for over a decade. He knew the immense scale of the generational wealth we commanded, and his expression conveyed the deep professional outrage of a banker who had just discovered a rat in his vault. "Simone," he began, "I have the revocation protocols queued up on my terminal. I need your verbal authorization to permanently terminate DeAndre's access to the secondary operational accounts, the corporate credit lines, and the real estate management portals." "You have my full and immediate authorization, David," I stated firmly. "Terminate all access." I watched David's hands move rapidly across his keyboard. There was no dramatic explosion, no loud alarms, no physical confrontation. The destruction of DeAndre's entire lifestyle was silent, bureaucratic, and absolute. It was reduced to the simple clicking of keys on a keyboard. "I am nullifying his authorized user status on the primary checking ledger," David narrated as he worked. "I am invalidating his signature on the corporate expense accounts. I am canceling the platinum and black cards issued under his name through the Proxy Limited Liability Company. The biometric login he uses for the real estate portal is now permanently disabled. As of this exact second, Simone, your husband has zero access to your family trust. He is operating on a zero balance." A profound, chilling silence filled my home office. It was done. The umbilical cord of wealth that had fed DeAndre's massive ego for 5 years had been cleanly severed. He was no longer a high-rolling managing director backed by unlimited capital. He was just a man with a leased lifestyle and a wardrobe he could no longer afford to dry clean. "Excellent work," David Vivian interjected, taking control of the meeting. Now we move to the federal escalation. Arthur outlined the reporting protocol for the forged commercial loan. Arthur Sterling adjusted his glasses and looked directly into the camera. "Simone, the $2 million commercial loan DeAndre secured against your Buckhead property is a textbook case of federal mortgage fraud. By forging your signature and colluding with a corrupt notary at his firm, he has triggered severe federal statutes. I have already drafted a suspicious activity report. We are filing this directly with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and I am personally fast-tracking a copy to my contacts at the Federal Bureau of Investigation here in Atlanta. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the weight of the strategy. Will the bank attempt to hold my trust liable for the $2 million he wired to Dubai? Absolutely not, Arthur replied with cold certainty. We have filed an affidavit of forgery. The burden of proof falls on the lending institution for failing to verify the biometric and secondary security protocols required by your trust. The bank will immediately freeze the loan. They will launch an internal investigation, which will automatically trigger an alert to DeAndre's employer. His wealth management firm will realize one of their directors committed bank fraud using their in-house notary. They will terminate him before the end of the business day tomorrow to avoid federal complicity. He dug his own grave, I said softly. I am simply providing the headstone. What about the $400,000 he embezzled for his mistress? Vivian offered a razor-sharp smile. That is where we bring in the Internal Revenue Service. Embezzled funds are considered taxable income by the federal government. DeAndre stole $400,000 and failed to declare it. Furthermore, he used those stolen funds to purchase a luxury vehicle and secure a commercial lease for Shayla. Shayla accepted a $150,000 Porsche without reporting it as a taxable gift. We are filing a formal whistleblower report with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. They will audit him, they will audit Shayla, and they will audit the medical spa business. They are going to seize the car, I stated, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. They are going to seize everything, Vivian corrected. The commercial lease for the spa will be invalidated due to fraudulent funding. The equipment will be repossessed. Shayla will be left with massive tax liabilities for accepting stolen assets. DeAndre wanted to play the role of the generous sugar daddy. We are making sure he pays the full federal price for his generosity. I am sending over the affidavits now, Simone. Sign them and the trap is officially armed. A notification pinged on my screen. I opened the secure portal and reviewed the stack of digital legal documents. These were the instruments of his destruction. The affidavit of forgery, the revocation of power of attorney, the official federal fraud complaints. I read through every single line, ensuring the language was airtight. DeAndre had looked at my pregnant belly and told me I was dragging down his brand. He had ordered me into the street so he could move his mistress into my bed. I felt my child flutter slightly in my womb, a tiny reassuring presence. I was protecting my bloodline. I placed my finger on the digital trackpad and applied my cryptographic signature to every single document. The paperwork is signed and submitted, I announced, clearing the screen. We are locked and loaded, Vivian confirmed. The banks will take approximately 12 to 18 hours to fully update their global cash servers. That means DeAndre's physical credit cards might still register as active for a few more hours, but any pending charges will ultimately bounce when the daily ledger attempts to reconcile. By tomorrow evening, the financial blackout will be complete. Get some rest, Simone. Tomorrow is going to be a masterpiece. The video conference ended, leaving me alone in the quiet hum of the penthouse. The legal and financial strikes were in motion, moving like a silent, invisible missile toward the Buckhead mansion. All I had to do now was wait for the impact. I opened my web browser and accessed the cellular provider dashboard. Since DeAndre was on my corporate family plan, I had full administrative access to his data usage and text message logs. I felt no guilt as I bypassed his privacy. He had surrendered his right to privacy the moment he committed grand larceny against my family. I watched his digital footprint in real time. It was a fascinating, pathetic display of a man completely unaware that he was a dead man walking. He was currently texting a premium catering service, confirming a menu of imported Wagyu, caviar, butter, poached lobster, and vintage champagne for tomorrow night's party. He authorized a $15,000 deposit using the corporate black card. The charge registered on the system. It was currently sitting in a pending state, floating in the digital ether. Tomorrow, when the caterers attempted to process the final payment, the bank servers would reject the transaction with a hard, unforgiving decline code. Next, I saw a string of text messages between DeAndre and Shayla. I cannot wait for tomorrow night, baby. Shayla texted, followed by a string of heart emojis. I am going to wear that red silk dress you bought me. Everyone is going to see who the real queen of Buckhead is. Have you heard from the substitute teacher yet? DeAndre replied instantly. Not a single word from Simone. She knows I hold all the cards. She is probably staying at some cheap motel out by the highway crying her eyes out. Do not even think about her baby. Tomorrow night is all about us. I am announcing the $2 million Dubai investment to the network. We are going straight to the top. I read the messages twice, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping my lips. The sheer magnitude of his delusion was almost impressive. He truly believed he had orchestrated the perfect crime. He believed he had successfully discarded a useless wife, secured millions in investment capital, and upgraded his lifestyle without a single consequence. I was happily decorating a house that he was about to be federally raided in. I leaned back and closed my eyes, visualizing the events that would unfold over the next 24 hours. I pictured the moment the caterers would demand payment. I pictured the tow trucks pulling up the long manicured driveway to drag away Shayla's beloved Porsche. I pictured the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers reflecting off the grand mahogany doors. And most importantly, I pictured the look on DeAndre's face when Vivian Sterling walked into his party to announce his eviction and his arrest. The tension in the air was palpable, a thick, heavy anticipation building in my chest. The trap was set, the arteries were severed. DeAndre was bleeding out financially, and he did not even know he had been cut. I placed my hand on my stomach, whispering a quiet promise to the life growing inside me. No one will ever disrespect us again. The countdown to the party had officially begun. The morning sun broke through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my midtown penthouse, marking the arrival of day 3. The city of Atlanta was waking up completely oblivious to the financial earthquake I was preparing to unleash. In any tactical takedown, you do not just eliminate the king. You must systematically dismantle the king's entire support system. Tasha and Jamal were not merely innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of a messy divorce. They were active, enthusiastic co-conspirators. They had stood in my home office and cheered as DeAndre verbally abused me. They had mocked my pregnancy, calling my unborn child a liability to their brother's brand. They had encouraged him to replace me with Shayla, eager to welcome a mistress who would fund their lavish outings. Now they were going to pay the toll for their misplaced loyalty. I settled back into my ergonomic chair and opened the real estate management portfolio on my encrypted server. I scrolled past commercial high-rises and logistics warehouses until I located the deed for the Midtown townhouse. It was a stunning 3-story property featuring a private elevator, a rooftop terrace, and a custom chef's kitchen. The current market value hovered around $3.2 million. 3 years ago, DeAndre had come to me playing the role of a desperate, concerned brother. He claimed Jamal's latest tech startup had failed miserably, and Tasha was facing imminent eviction from a cramped apartment. Out of the kindness of my heart, I had authorized the family trust to purchase the townhouse. I allowed them to live there under a corporate housing provision, completely rent-free, while they supposedly got back on their feet. DeAndre naturally had taken all the credit for the rescue. He told his family that his brilliant wealth management strategies and elite market investments had paid for the home. Tasha spent the next 3 years parading around Atlanta, acting like an affluent socialite. She hosted extravagant brunch parties on the rooftop, posed for photos in front of the marble fireplace, and looked down her nose at working-class people. She lived an elite lifestyle completely subsidized by the woman she had just called a freeloader. She had stood in my house dripping in entitlement and commanded me to recognize my place. The breathtaking hypocrisy of her arrogance was about to be surgically corrected. I drafted a priority communication to the Property Law Division at Vivian Sterling's firm, because DeAndre had secured their occupancy through his authorized user status. And because he had subsequently committed federal fraud using trust assets, his authorizations were retroactively voided. This legally reclassified the status of Tasha and Jamal. They were no longer authorized guests. They were illegal squatters occupying a premium property secured through fraudulent means. In the state of Georgia, a standard residential eviction can take weeks or even months of tedious legal maneuvering. But when a commercial property is tied to an active federal financial crime and the occupants are classified as accessories to a hostile takeover of trust assets, the rules change entirely. I formally requested a 24-hour emergency notice to quit based on fraudulent occupation. I attached the digital ledgers, proving that DeAndre had funneled stolen money into Shayla's businesses establishing a clear pattern of embezzlement that compromised every single agreement he had ever signed on my behalf. My phone chimed with a direct message from Vivian. The Fulton County Sheriff's Department had already reviewed the emergency affidavits. Given the staggering magnitude of the federal mortgage fraud associated with DeAndre, the sheriffs were highly motivated to secure all properties linked to the compromised limited liability company. The emergency eviction was signed and approved by a Superior Court judge less than an hour ago. The execution of the warrant was scheduled for exactly 8 o'clock tonight. That timing was absolutely no accident. I had specifically requested that the sheriffs arrive at the Midtown townhouse at the exact moment DeAndre's anniversary party reached its peak in Buckhead. I wanted Tasha and Jamal forced out of their home and standing on the sidewalk at the precise second DeAndre's credit cards began declining across town. I poured myself a glass of iced lemon water, savoring the cold, sharp taste. If I simply destroyed DeAndre and left his family untouched, he would immediately run to his sister. Tasha would throw open her mahogany doors, offer him a luxurious guest bedroom, and feed his towering ego. She would convince him that he was still a king, that the federal charges were just a temporary setback, and that I was nothing more than a vindictive, bitter woman trying to keep a good man down. Jamal would eagerly help him hide whatever loose assets remained. Together, they would form a fortified support group of enablers plotting ways to drag out the divorce, harass me through the media, and cause unbearable stress during my pregnancy. I had to completely obliterate his safety net. By evicting them simultaneously, I was guaranteeing that when DeAndre fell from his artificial throne, he would hit absolute rock bottom. He would have no soft couch to sleep on. He would have no fiercely loyal sister to comfort him. Tasha would be far too busy screaming at the police and crying over her confiscated designer shoe collection to care about her brother's ruined career. Jamal would be too panicked about his own sudden homelessness to offer DeAndre any strategic advice. I was engineering a synchronized collapse. I tapped into the exterior security cameras of the Midtown townhouse, bringing the live feed up on my secondary monitor. The crisp morning video showed Jamal walking out to the driveway to polish his leased luxury sedan. Tasha walked out a moment later, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She was wearing a plush silk robe that I had technically paid for through the corporate expense accounts. They were laughing together in the morning sun. They looked so incredibly relaxed. They felt entirely untouchable. I watched Tasha pull out her phone and record a quick video for her social media followers, likely bragging about her outfit for the upcoming party at the Buckhead mansion. She was actively preparing to celebrate the elevation of DeAndre's mistress. She had absolutely no inkling that the very ground she was standing on was about to be pulled out from under her feet. I opened a separate communication window and contacted a private estate liquidator. I paid a premium fee to have a specialized moving crew placed on standby directly down the street from the townhouse. When the sheriffs arrived at 8 o'clock to execute the emergency eviction, the moving crew would follow them inside. They were instructed to pack up all of Tasha and Jamal's personal belongings and place them neatly on the public curb. I was not going to give them a single excuse to ever step foot inside my property again. I wanted their entire lives boxed up and removed with ruthless, undeniable efficiency. My tablet chimed with an incoming email from David Vance, the director of my private wealth management syndicate. The message contained the final confirmation receipts. Every single secondary account linked to DeAndre was now officially frozen. The corporate lines of credit were suspended. The routing numbers he used to funnel money to Shayla's medical spa were flagged and reported to the federal authorities. The financial lockdown was complete. DeAndre was currently walking around Atlanta with a wallet full of useless plastic, completely blind to the fact that his net worth was officially zero. I closed the email and leaned forward, resting my elbows on the sleek desk. The sheer audacity of their entire family still amazed me. They had been handed a life of effortless luxury on a silver platter. All they had to do was show a basic level of respect. All DeAndre had to do was honor the vows he took and appreciate the woman who was quietly underwriting his entire existence. Instead, they chose greed. They chose cruelty. They looked at my quiet demeanor and mistook it for stupidity. They believed my lack of flashy designer labels meant a lack of power. My grandfather used to say that you never truly know a person until you see how they handle unearned power. DeAndre was given power he did not earn, and he immediately used it to try and crush the person who gave it to him. He used it to fund a mistress. He used it to elevate his equally toxic sister. He tried to use it to intimidate the mother of his unborn child. I pressed my hand against my stomach, feeling a fierce protective surge of maternal instinct. I was not just dismantling a cheating husband anymore. I was eradicating a threat to my child's future. DeAndre would never get the chance to teach my child his twisted, arrogant values. Tasha would never get the opportunity to whisper her toxic, superficial judgments into my child's ear. I was tearing the infection out by the roots. The digital clock on my monitor shifted to noon. 8 hours remained until the party commenced. 8 hours until DeAndre raised his glass to toast his fraudulent $2 million investment. 8 hours until Tasha walked into the mansion eager to parade Shayla around as the new queen of the family. I minimized the security camera feeds and stood up from my desk. The legal traps were armed. The federal agencies were notified. The sheriffs were scheduled. The moving crews were on standby. Every single variable had been meticulously calculated and locked into place. I walked into the kitchen to prepare a healthy lunch, moving with the calm, measured grace of a woman who had already won the war. I had ensured that DeAndre's enablers would be far too consumed by their own sudden ruin to offer him a single shred of support. When the federal hammer finally dropped on his head tonight, he would be completely, utterly, and devastatingly alone. Night fell over Atlanta, painting the city skyline in brilliant streaks of violet and gold. Inside my midtown penthouse, the atmosphere was perfectly still. I sat in front of my command center, a wall of high-definition monitors glowing softly in the darkened room. On the screens, the Buckhead mansion was alive with a sickening, vibrant energy. The dramatic irony of the situation was so thick I could practically taste it. I was watching a man host a lavish celebration for a life that no longer existed. The driveway of the estate was lined with luxury vehicles. Valets in crisp white shirts rushed to open doors for Atlanta's elite. I watched through the exterior security feeds as DeAndre's guests arrived. These were the high-net-worth individuals he spent years courting, the local politicians, the real estate developers, and his loud, ambitious fraternity brothers. They walked up the sweeping stone steps, admiring the manicured lawns and the imposing architecture, completely unaware that the property was owned by the very woman DeAndre had violently discarded 24 hours earlier. I switched the audio feed to the main living room. The hidden microphones installed years ago by my grandfather's security team for insurance purposes captured every sound with crystal clarity. A string quartet played a sophisticated rendition of a modern hip-hop song, providing the perfect soundtrack for DeAndre's grand delusion. Waiters in black uniforms circulated through the crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with Wagyu beef sliders, butter-poached lobster bites, and flutes of vintage champagne. DeAndre had spared absolutely no expense for a party he could not afford to pay for. He stood near the grand fireplace holding court, just as he had the night before. But tonight he was not pretending to be a devoted husband. Tonight he wore a custom-tailored burgundy velvet tuxedo jacket, looking every bit the arrogant king he believed himself to be. Standing right beside him, clutching his arm, was Shayla. She wore a skin-tight red silk dress that left nothing to the imagination. She was draped in diamond jewelry that DeAndre had undoubtedly purchased using my stolen funds. She laughed loudly, tossing her hair back and leaning into him, playing the role of the ultimate trophy. Tasha and Jamal entered the frame a few minutes later. Tasha was practically vibrating with excitement. She rushed over to Shayla, pulling her into an exaggerated hug. "Look at you," Tasha squealed, her voice echoing through my speakers. "You look absolutely stunning. This house finally has a woman inside it who matches its energy. Did you see the valet parking your new Porsche out front? It looks flawless in the driveway." Shayla preened, running a hand down the sleek fabric of her dress. "Thank you, babe." DeAndre really outdid himself. He promised me we were going to take over this city, and he delivered. The energy in this house is totally different now that the dead weight is gone. I spent all morning clearing out those boring, cheap clothes from the master closet. We are bringing in an interior decorator next week to modernize the whole wing. Jamal slapped DeAndre on the back, handing him a fresh glass of bourbon. You did it, man. You made the hard call, cut the dead weight, and leveled up. This is what generational wealth looks like. I took a slow sip of my sparkling cider. The term generational wealth coming out of Jamal's mouth was the highest form of comedy. He was a man who had not paid rent in 3 years, standing in a house he did not own, praising a man who had $0 to his name. They were a circle of leeches congratulating each other on sucking the same dry host. DeAndre puffed out his chest, taking a sip of his expensive bourbon. It was about time, Jamal. A man can only carry a liability for so long before it starts dragging down his net worth. Simone lacked vision. She did not understand the hustle. But tonight is not about the past. Tonight is about the future. Wait until you hear the announcement I am making. I leaned closer to the monitor. DeAndre signaled to a tall, flashy man standing near the bar. It was Marcus, his fraternity brother, and the alleged mastermind behind the Dubai commercial real estate venture. Marcus swaggered over, raising his glass in a toast. To the $2 million man, Marcus cheered, clinking his glass against DeAndre's. The wire transfer cleared this morning, my brother. The funds are locked into the overseas development accounts. We are officially international players. By this time next year, that 2 million will be 10 million and we will be buying our own islands. DeAndre grinned, a predatory, arrogant smile that made my stomach turn. I knew it was a risk, he bragged, lowering his voice just enough to sound conspiratorial. But you have to leverage your assets if you want to play with the big boys. I tapped into the equity on this house. When you have a property this valuable, it is basically printing free money. The bank approved it in record time. They know my name holds weight in this city. I shook my head in utter disbelief. He was actively confessing to federal mortgage fraud on a recorded security feed surrounded by witnesses. He genuinely believed that forging my signature and bypassing the legal trust barriers was a stroke of financial genius. He had no concept of the digital tripwires he had tripped. The FBI agents who would review this footage were going to have the easiest conviction of their careers. As the clock on my wall ticked closer to 8 o'clock, the atmosphere in the mansion reached a fever pitch. DeAndre moved to the center of the grand foyer, positioning himself directly beneath the massive crystal chandelier. He picked up a silver spoon and tapped it sharply against his champagne flute. The sharp ringing cut through the music and the chatter. The string quartet faded into silence. The wealthy investors, the socialites, and the enablers all turned their attention to the man of the hour. Family, friends, and esteemed colleagues. DeAndre began, his voice projecting through the cavernous space. I want to thank you all for joining me tonight in my home. We are here to celebrate success, growth, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the crowd. He looked like a man who had conquered the world. For the past 5 years, I have worked tirelessly to build an empire. He continued, his tone dripping with self-importance. I have navigated the volatile markets, managed high-level portfolios, and established a brand that stands for excellence. But elevating your life requires making difficult choices. It requires recognizing when certain elements of your life are holding you back. Sometimes, you have to shed the comfortable and the familiar in order to step into your true power. You cannot drag dead weight to the top of the mountain. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Tasha nodded enthusiastically, whispering something to Jamal. They all knew exactly who he was talking about. He was publicly degrading me, spinning his cruel sudden eviction into a heroic tale of personal growth. But when you finally clear away the distractions, DeAndre said, reaching out and pulling Shayla to his side, you make room for genuine synergy. You make room for a partner who matches your drive, your aesthetic, and your ambition. I want to officially introduce the woman standing beside me, Shayla. She is a brilliant entrepreneur who just secured a prime location for her new luxury medical spa. She understands the hustle. She is the queen this castle deserves. The crowd erupted into polite applause. Shayla beamed, pressing a kiss to DeAndre's cheek. The sheer delusion radiating from the screen was intoxicating. He had funded her business with stolen money, and he was bragging about her entrepreneurial spirit to a room full of actual investors. And the good news does not stop there, DeAndre announced, raising his glass higher. Today, I officially secured a $2 million commercial funding round to expand my portfolio into international real estate. We are developing luxury commercial spaces in Dubai. We are taking the brand global. I am telling you all right now, the sky is the limit. When you bet on yourself, the universe rewards you. He raised his glass toward the chandelier. To success, to new beginnings, to claiming the throne. To the throne, the crowd echoed back, raising their glasses in unison. I watched the screen, my face a mask of absolute calm. The dramatic irony was a masterpiece. Every single person in that room was raising a glass to a man who possessed exactly $0 in liquid assets. He was boasting about a $2 million international investment that was currently being flagged by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. He was showing off a mistress whose luxury car was legally classified as stolen property. He was claiming ownership of a mansion that was actively rejecting his presence. I glanced at the digital clock on my secondary monitor. It was 7:58 in the evening, 2 minutes until the synchronized collapse. Down in the kitchen of the Buckhead mansion, out of sight from the cheering guests, the catering manager was standing near the industrial ovens. I was holding a mobile credit card terminal and DeAndre's black corporate card. He swiped the magnetic strip to authorize the final $15,000 payment for the evening's food and staff. I watched the small LCD screen on his terminal flash a bright angry red. Transaction declined. Account closed. The catering manager frowned, assuming it was a simple network error. He wiped the magnetic strip on his apron and swiped the card a second time. Once again, the machine beeped with a harsh, denying tone. The manager pulled out his phone, his expression shifting from confusion to annoyance. At that exact same moment on my tertiary monitor, the live feed from the Midtown townhouse flared to life. A procession of marked Fulton County Sheriff vehicles pulled up to the curb. Their blue and white lights pulsed silently against the darkening street. Behind them, two massive moving trucks idled, their engines rumbling as a crew of burly men in matching uniforms stepped out, carrying heavy cardboard boxes and industrial tape. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my folded hands. The applause in the Buckhead mansion was just beginning to fade. DeAndre was smiling, soaking in the admiration of his peers, entirely convinced that his reign had just begun. He had no idea that the crown he was wearing was rigged with explosives. The music swelled back up, but I muted the audio. I did not need to hear the string quartet anymore. The only sound I wanted to hear was the sound of his entire life shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The show was about to begin. DeAndre stepped down from his makeshift stage beneath the crystal chandelier, basking in the applause of Atlanta's elite. He adjusted his velvet tuxedo jacket and accepted handshakes, backslaps, and nods of approval from the millionaire investors he had invited. He genuinely believed he had arrived. He thought he was the smartest man in Georgia. From my penthouse command center, I watched him glide toward the bar, reaching for another glass of vintage champagne. But before his fingers could graze the crystal stem, chef Antoine stepped directly into his path. Antoine was a highly respected culinary director in Buckhead, known for his impeccable discretion and his absolute refusal to work for free. DeAndre flashed a brilliant artificial smile, assuming the chef was coming to congratulate him on the event. Instead, Antoine leaned in close, ensuring the surrounding guests could not hear his words. "Sir, there seems to be a minor complication," Antoine murmured, his face a mask of professional severity. "The corporate card you placed on file for the remaining $15,000 balance has been declined." DeAndre let out a short, dismissive laugh. He waved his hand, completely unbothered. "It is just a security freeze, Antoine. When you swipe a black card for a large amount at night, the bank automatically flags it. Run it again." "I already ran it a second time, Sir," Antoine replied, his tone chillingly flat. The terminal did not indicate a fraud hold. The specific error code reads, "Account closed." Through the high-definition feed, I saw the very first crack appear in DeAndre's flawless facade. His smile faltered. His eyebrows drew together in a tight, confused line. He patted the breast pocket of his jacket, pulling out a sleek leather wallet. "That is impossible," DeAndre hissed, keeping his voice low so Marcus and the other investors nearby would not hear. "I am a managing director. That account holds millions. Your machine is malfunctioning. Here, take my platinum corporate card. Run this one and bring me the receipt." Antoine accepted the heavy metal card with a curt nod and retreated toward the kitchen. DeAndre turned back to his guests, forcing his smile back into place. He grabbed his champagne and took a long, greedy swallow. He was trying to project power, but his eyes kept darting toward the kitchen doors. He was a man who built his entire identity on financial supremacy, and the mere suggestion of a declined card was enough to trigger his deep-seated insecurities. I switched the camera feed to the kitchen. Antoine stood over the payment terminal surrounded by towers of empty serving trays. He swiped the platinum card. The LCD screen processed the request for exactly 2 seconds before flashing a bright red warning. Transaction declined. Account closed. Antoine sighed, a look of profound annoyance crossing his face. He grabbed the card and marched straight back into the main living room. He did not bother with discretion this time. He walked right up to DeAndre, interrupting a conversation between my husband and a prominent real estate developer. "Mr. Brooks," Antoine said, his voice cutting through the smooth jazz music. "The second card has also been rejected. The terminal is explicitly stating that the account has been terminated by the primary account holder. I have a staff of 20 people working tonight. I need a valid form of payment immediately, or I am pulling my servers from the floor." The real estate developer raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of his drink. DeAndre's face flushed a deep, humiliated crimson. A bead of sweat broke out on his forehead, catching the light from the chandelier. "Keep your voice down, Antoine." DeAndre gritted out, grabbing the chef by the elbow and steering him away from the guests. "There is obviously a massive glitch in the banking network. Let me use my personal wealth management cards." DeAndre frantically pulled 2 more credit cards from his wallet. One was a premium travel card, the other a high-limit personal checking card. He shoved both of them into Antoine's hands. "Run them both, split the charge. Just get it done and stop embarrassing me in front of my network." I did not need to switch the camera feed back to the kitchen to know the outcome. David Vance had executed his orders flawlessly. Every single account attached to DeAndre's social security number, every corporate line of credit, every joint proxy card had been eradicated. DeAndre was currently handing Antoine pieces of worthless plastic. Less than 2 minutes later, Antoine returned. He dropped all 4 cards onto the silver tray a passing waiter was holding. He looked at DeAndre with utter contempt. "Every single card is dead," Antoine announced, raising his voice just enough for the surrounding circle of elites to hear. "The codes all say the same thing. Unauthorized user. Account completely dissolved. I am halting the kitchen operations. My staff is packing up the remaining food. If you want this resolved, you will wire the funds directly to my business account by tomorrow morning, or I am sending this to collections and letting everyone in Buckhead know you write bad checks." Whispers rippled through the grand foyer. The string quartet continued to play, creating a surreal, elegant background noise for a complete social disaster. Marcus stepped away from DeAndre, looking suddenly wary. The local politicians exchanged uncomfortable glances. In Atlanta's high society, wealth is a shield, but financial instability is a highly contagious disease. No one wanted to stand too close to a man whose credit cards were bouncing like rubber balls. DeAndre pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands were physically shaking. He opened his banking application and pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. The screen loaded for a fraction of a second before kicking him back to the login page. A sterile automated message popped up on his screen. "Access denied. Contact Primary Trust Administrator." He stared at the words. "Contact Primary Trust Administrator." I sat in my penthouse watching him realize that the leash had finally tightened. He had spent 5 years enjoying the view from the top floor, entirely forgetting who owned the building. He tried to type in his password manually. Denied. He tried to access his wealth management portal. Denied. He opened his cryptocurrency wallet looking for the emergency funds he had skimmed last year. The wallet showed a balance of exactly 0. DeAndre was hyperventilating now. He tugged at the collar of his custom velvet tuxedo, suddenly looking like a man trapped in a burning room. He looked around the mansion at the imported artwork, the marble columns, and the expensive guests. He was standing in a palace, but he had just discovered he was locked outside the gates. Before he could even attempt to formulate a lie to save face, a high-pitched hysterical shriek pierced the air. "DeAndre, what is going on?" Shayla pushed her way through the crowd of bewildered guests. The red silk dress that had looked so glamorous an hour ago now looked cheap and desperate as she stumbled on her stilettos. She was holding her phone out in front of her like a weapon. Her perfectly contoured face was twisted in sheer panic. DeAndre tried to grab her arm to quiet her down. Not right now, Shayla. I am dealing with a banking issue. Keep your voice down. I am not keeping my voice down, Shayla screamed, yanking her arm away. My car is moving. DeAndre blinked, completely thrown off guard by the sudden pivot. What are you talking about? Your car is parked in the driveway. I gave the keys to the valet myself. Shayla shoved her phone directly into his face. Look at the tracking app. The security system on the Porsche just sent me an alert. The engine is on and the GPS shows the car is currently driving down Peachtree Road. Someone is stealing my car. DeAndre stared at this blinking red dot on the screen. The dot was indeed moving away from the Buckhead mansion at a steady 45 miles per hour. The repo men Vivian hired were exceptionally efficient. They had not even bothered to ask the valet for the keys. They simply hooked the Porsche to a silent flatbed tow truck and drove away with it. Go outside and stop them! Shayla demanded, hitting DeAndre on the chest with her free hand. You paid $150,000 for that car. Tell the valets to chase them down. Call the police. The guests were no longer just whispering. They were openly staring. The sophisticated anniversary party had rapidly devolved into a reality television spectacle. The man who had just delivered an arrogant speech about claiming the throne was now standing in his foyer, surrounded by dead credit cards, an angry chef, and a screaming mistress demanding he chase down a stolen luxury vehicle. DeAndre's mind was short-circuiting. He could not call the police to report a stolen car because he knew he had purchased that car using embezzled funds. If the police ran the vehicle identification number, they would immediately flag it as connected to the fraudulent shell accounts. He was completely paralyzed by the very crimes he had committed to secure his fake lifestyle. Calm down, Shayla! DeAndre hissed, his voice cracking with desperation. I will buy you another car tomorrow. Just stop making a scene in front of my investors. I do not want another car tomorrow. I want my Porsche right now, Shayla wailed. Marcus stepped forward, his expression hardening. DeAndre, what is going on here, man? Your cards are bouncing. Shayla's car is getting jacked from your own driveway. You just pitched me a $2 million international development deal. Are you liquid or not? DeAndre turned to his fraternity brother, sweat pouring down his temples. Marcus, listen to me. I am completely liquid. This is just a massive banking error. My wife Simone, she handles the administrative backend for the household accounts. She must have messed up the security protocols when she left today. Even as he said the words, he knew how weak they sounded. He was trying to blame the pregnant wife he had just kicked out of the house, but the excuse held absolutely no weight. The investors were looking at him with growing disgust. A man who claims to manage wealth for elite athletes and entrepreneurs should never experience a total financial blackout. I sat in my command center, a cold smile touching my lips. DeAndre was scrambling desperately, trying to plug the holes in a sinking ship. He was trying to save his reputation, completely unaware that the real torpedo had not even breached the water yet. He thought this was just a bad night. He thought he could call his bank in the morning, yell at a customer service representative, and regain his power. He did not know that the tow trucks had not just taken the Porsche, they had also taken his Range Rover. He did not know that the $2 million loan he was bragging about had already been flagged by federal agents. He did not know that his sister Tasha was currently standing on a sidewalk in Midtown, watching sheriffs throw her designer bags onto the pavement. DeAndre looked around his grand foyer, his chest heaving. The caterers were aggressively packing up the silver warming trays, letting the expensive food go cold. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely, packing their instruments into velvet cases. The guests were slowly backing away, checking their phones and looking for the exit. The illusion of the self-made king was shattering into a million jagged pieces, and the front door had not even opened yet. I reached out and gently traced the edge of my monitor, watching his panicked, sweating face. The public humiliation was thorough, but it was merely the appetizer. The main course was walking up his driveway right now. I leaned back, resting my hands on my stomach, and waited for the heavy mahogany doors to swing wide open. The execution was running perfectly on schedule. The heavy mahogany doors swung inward with a violent crash that echoed through the cavernous foyer. A gust of warm Atlanta night air rushed in, carrying with it the undeniable sound of heavy diesel engines and grinding hydraulic gears. The remaining guests turned in unison. Shayla practically shoved Marcus aside and bolted for the open doorway, her high heels snapping against the marble. I zoomed in on the primary exterior camera feed. The driveway of the Buckhead mansion was bathed in the harsh, flashing amber lights of two massive flatbed tow trucks. One was already securing Shayla's white Porsche Cayenne. The second truck had expertly maneuvered around the fountain and was currently hooking heavy steel chains to the axles of DeAndre's prized black Range Rover. "My car!" DeAndre bellowed, his voice cracking as he finally registered the scene outside. "What are you doing? Get away from my vehicle!" He sprinted through the front doors, nearly tripping over the threshold in his custom velvet tuxedo. Shayla was already on the lawn, screaming at the top of her lungs, waving her arms frantically at a large bearded man in a high-visibility vest. "Drop the car right now!" Shayla shrieked, slapping her hands against the side of the tow truck. "Do you know who he is? He is a managing director. He will buy your entire company and fire you. Put my Porsche down." The repo man did not even flinch. He casually chewed on a piece of gum, locked the winch into place, and pulled a clipboard from his jacket. He turned to face DeAndre, who was storming down the brick pathway with his fists clenched. "Are you deaf?" DeAndre roared, stepping squarely into the man's personal space. "Unhook my Range Rover. I am calling the police. You are stealing private property from a gated estate." The repo man clicked his pen and held out the clipboard. "You are DeAndre Brooks." "Yes, I am DeAndre Brooks, and you are about to lose your job." The man chuckled, a deep, raspy sound that carried perfectly over my audio feed. "I highly doubt that, buddy. I am executing a lawful asset recovery order issued by the Fulton County courts." Both of these vehicles were flagged for repossession due to fraudulent funding and breach of contract. Sign here acknowledging we took the cars without physical altercation, or do not sign it at all. We are taking them either way. DeAndre stared at the clipboard as if it were a venomous snake. "Fraudulent funding? What are you talking about? My accounts are fully funded. This is a clerical error. I demand you unhook those cars immediately. I will write you a check right now to clear whatever balance you think I owe." "Sir," the man replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I do not take checks. I take the cars. The paperwork explicitly states these assets were purchased using stolen funds routed through a shell company. The primary trust holder revoked all authorized user statuses this afternoon. Your cars belong to the bank now. Step back from the rig." Shayla whipped her head around, her eyes wide with mounting panic. She grabbed DeAndre by the lapels of his jacket. "What does he mean, stolen funds? DeAndre, tell him he is lying. You bought me that Porsche for my business launch. Tell him to drop my car." DeAndre was paralyzed. He looked at the paperwork, then at Shayla, and finally at the gathered crowd of investors and fraternity brothers who had wandered out onto the grand portico to watch the spectacle. The wealthy elites of Atlanta were witnessing the self-proclaimed king being stripped of his chariots in real time. Marcus stepped down the stairs, his expression a mix of pity and profound anger. "DeAndre, what is going on here? They are repossessing your cars for fraud. Is this why your cards were declining inside? Are you actually broke?" "Marcus, listen to me," DeAndre stammered, his polished vocabulary abandoning him entirely. "It is a mistake. My wife is trying to ruin my reputation because we are getting a divorce. She locked my accounts out of spite. It is just a temporary freeze." I smiled at my monitors. He was still trying to blame me, still trying to spin a narrative where he was the victim of a bitter woman. He had absolutely no idea how deep the water he was drowning in truly was. Just as the repo men finished securing the Range Rover to the second flatbed, the iron gates at the bottom of the driveway slid open again. A procession of 4 unmarked, blacked-out SUVs rolled onto the property, their tires crunching loudly against the gravel. They moved with military precision, boxing in the tow trucks and completely blocking the exit. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating DeAndre like a deer caught in the headlights. The doors of the lead SUV opened simultaneously. Out stepped Vivian Sterling. She looked like the Grim Reaper of high finance, draped in a flawless trench coat, carrying a pristine leather briefcase. She did not walk. She commanded the pavement. Flanking her were 6 individuals wearing dark windbreakers, The bold, yellow letters on the backs of their jackets gleamed under the amber lights of the tow trucks. FBI, IRS Criminal Investigation. The murmurs on the porch instantly died. The catering staff who had been watching from the service entrance froze in their tracks. The presence of a repo man was an embarrassing social faux pas. The presence of federal agents was a radioactive disaster. Vivienne marched directly up the driveway, her heels clicking rhythmically against the stone. The federal agents fanned out their hands, resting comfortably near their duty belts. Two agents moved to secure the perimeter of the driveway, while the others followed Vivienne straight toward the front doors of the mansion. DeAndre stood frozen in the center of the lawn, his mouth hung open. The arrogant sneer he had worn for 5 years had completely melted away, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. He looked from Vivienne to the federal badges, his brain short-circuiting, as it tried to process the sheer scale of the ambush. "Excuse me," DeAndre finally choked out, stepping into Vivienne's path as she approached the portico. "You cannot be here. This is private property. This is an exclusive event." Vivienne stopped. She looked at DeAndre with an expression of such absolute chilling disdain that he physically recoiled. "You are absolutely correct, Mr. Brooks," Vivienne said, her voice projecting clearly across the silent courtyard. "This is private property. However, it is not your property. It belongs to the Sterling Vanguard Trust. I am the senior legal counsel representing the sole managing director of that trust, your wife Simone. I am here executing a lawful mandate to secure the premises against a hostile and fraudulent occupant." DeAndre's eyes darted frantically around the yard. "Simone sent you. She sent lawyers to my anniversary party. Tell her to call me right now. This is a massive overreaction." "Simone does not negotiate with thieves," Vivienne replied sharply. "She eliminates them." A tall, broad-shouldered agent stepped forward, flashing a gold badge that caught the light of the chandelier spilling from the open doorway. "DeAndre Brooks. I am Special Agent Miller, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division. We have a federal warrant to secure this property and confiscate all electronic devices, physical ledgers, and communication equipment associated with your corporate operations." DeAndre backed up, shaking his head. "You have no right to do this. I am a managing director at a top-tier wealth management firm. I have done nothing wrong. My wife is having a mental breakdown. She is pregnant and acting irrationally." Agent Miller did not blink. "Your wife's mental state is not our concern, Mr. Brooks. Our concern is the $2 million commercial loan you secured yesterday morning. The one where you fraudulently leveraged a property you do not own, utilizing a forged signature and a compromised notary public. You routed those illicit funds into a high-risk overseas development account, committing federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft." The collective gasp from the crowd on the porch was deafening. Marcus practically shoved his way backward, desperate to put as much physical distance between himself and DeAndre as possible. The investors who had just clinked glasses with him were now looking at him like he was carrying the plague. $2 million. Forged signatures. Wire fraud. The words hung in the humid Atlanta air, heavy and inescapable. DeAndre looked at Marcus, silently begging for backup, but Marcus turned his head away in disgust. Shayla let out a sharp, hysterical sob. "You forged documents. You lied to me. You told me you were a millionaire. You bought my med spa with stolen money." Vivienne turned her piercing gaze toward Shayla. "Ah yes, the mistress. The IRS agents accompanying us today will be deeply interested in speaking with you. Accepting $150,000 in stolen funds to purchase a luxury vehicle and operating a commercial lease funded by embezzled trust money creates a rather massive undeclared tax liability. I suggest you find a very good defense attorney by tomorrow morning." Shayla shrieked, backing away from DeAndre as if he had just burst into flames. She looked at the tow truck pulling her Porsche out of the driveway, then looked at the federal agents closing in on the mansion. She did not say another word. She turned on her expensive heels and sprinted down the driveway, abandoning her purse, abandoning her pride, and completely abandoning the man she had called her king just an hour prior. DeAndre reached out as if to stop her, but his hand fell limply to his side. He was completely surrounded. The tow trucks were hauling away the last physical symbols of his fake wealth. His guests were watching his total humiliation. His mistress had fled into the night, and federal agents were marching past him to raid the house he had tried to kick me out of. I sat in the glow of my monitors, sipping my cider. The trap had not just snapped shut, it had crushed every single bone in his body. He was paralyzed watching agents carry boxes of evidence out of his home office. The office where he had proudly declared I was dragging down his brand. The office where his sister had laughed at my pain. The execution was flawless, but the night was not over. The ultimate symphony of destruction requires every instrument to play its part. DeAndre was suffocating under the weight of his own crimes, but I knew the final devastating blow was currently ringing through a cell phone in his pocket. The final domino was about to fall, and I was going to enjoy every second of the crash. The sharp, piercing ring-tone of a cell phone shattered the dead silence of the courtyard. It was not DeAndre's phone, it was Tasha's. She had been standing frozen on the top step of the portico, her designer clutch pressed against her chest as she watched the federal agents swarm the property. Her phone kept ringing, a loud and obnoxious hip-hop beat that felt entirely inappropriate for a federal raid. Tasha fumbled with her clutch, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the device. She swiped the screen to answer, pressing the phone to her ear. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice trembling. From my penthouse monitors, I had the audio feed boosted to maximum. Even over the commotion of the agents securing the front doors, I could hear Jamal's frantic, hysterical screaming coming through Tasha's speaker. "Tasha, you need to get home right now!" Jamal shrieked, his voice cracking with pure panic. "There are sheriffs everywhere. They kicked down the front door. They are dragging our furniture out onto the sidewalk. They just threw my television onto the grass. They are tossing your clothes into the street. Tasha, they are evicting us." Tasha's face contorted in absolute horror. "What are you talking about, Jamal? You cannot be evicted at 8 o'clock at night. Tell them they have the wrong house. Call DeAndre. He bought this place. Tell them my brother owns the building." "I do not own it." DeAndre choked out his voice, a pathetic hollow rasp. Everyone on the porch turned to stare at him. Tasha lowered her phone, her eyes wide and wild. "What do you mean you do not own it?" she demanded, her voice rising to a hysterical screech. "You told us you bought it. You told us it was your investment property. Jamal is standing on the curb with our entire life in garbage bags. DeAndre, do something." Vivian Sterling stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the stone. She commanded the space with the effortless authority of a woman who destroyed arrogant men for a living. "He cannot do anything for you," Vivian announced, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative for every guest, caterer, and agent to hear. "DeAndre Brooks does not own the Midtown townhouse you occupy. He does not own the luxury vehicles currently being towed from this driveway, and he certainly does not own this estate. Every single asset you see here belongs entirely to the generational trust of his wife Simone. He is nothing more than a fraud who used his authorized access to play pretend with money he never earned." The collective gasp from the elite crowd was a symphony to my ears. The truth was finally stripped bare. The self-made king was exposed as a glorified squatter who had been completely subsidized by the pregnant wife he had just thrown onto the street. Marcus, the fraternity brother, who had been toasting to their mutual success just 20 minutes ago, looked at DeAndre with utter revulsion. "You lied to us," Marcus spat, backing away, as if DeAndre were contagious. "You pitched me a $2 million international deal using stolen money. You leveraged your own wife's family trust to fund a scam. You are dead in this city, DeAndre. Your career is over. I am calling the board of directors tomorrow morning. You will never manage another portfolio as long as you live." Before DeAndre could even attempt to formulate a pathetic defense, a blur of red silk pushed through the crowd of federal agents. Shayla had realized she left her expensive handbag inside the foyer when she initially fled from the tow trucks. She marched straight up to DeAndre, her face streaked with ruined makeup and tears of absolute rage. "You told me you were a millionaire," Shayla screamed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger directly at his face. "You told me Simone was a broke, boring liability holding you back. You promised me we were going to take over Atlanta. You bought my business with stolen money. The Internal Revenue Service is going to audit me because of you. I'm going to lose my license. I am going to prison because of your lies." "Shayla, baby, please," DeAndre pleaded, holding his hands up in a desperate attempt to calm her down. I can fix this. I just need to call my lawyers. I can explain everything to the feds. Shayla did not wait for his explanation. She pulled her arm back and delivered a resounding, vicious slap directly across DeAndre's face. The smack echoed like a gunshot across the courtyard. DeAndre stumbled backward, clutching his jaw completely emasculated in front of his entire network. "Do not ever speak to me again," Shayla hissed, her chest heaving. "You are a broke, pathetic liar. I hope they lock you under the jail." She snatched her purse from the marble console table inside the doorway, turned on her heel, and marched down the driveway. She did not look back as she walked past the tow truck that was currently hauling away the Porsche she had been bragging about all morning. She was forced to walk down the long, sweeping driveway in her stiletto heels, calling a ride-share service to escape the federal raid she had unwittingly walked into. Agent Miller stepped forward, having given the domestic dispute enough time to play out for his own amusement. He grabbed DeAndre by the shoulder, spinning him around with authoritative force. DeAndre Brooks, Agent Miller barked, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for federal mortgage fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The harsh metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting securely around DeAndre's wrists was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The king of Buckhead was officially in chains. He stood there, his custom velvet tuxedo looking utterly ridiculous against the backdrop of federal law enforcement. His shoulders slumped, his chest caved in, and the arrogant, untouchable posture he had maintained for 5 years evaporated into the humid night air. DeAndre looked wildly around the courtyard, desperately searching for a lifeline. His eyes landed on Tasha, who was still holding her phone, weeping uncontrollably as Jamal continued to scream through the speaker. Tasha, DeAndre begged, his voice cracking with sheer terror. "Call the firm. Tell them I need the corporate defense team. Tell them to wire bail money. I cannot go to federal holding. Tasha, please, you have to help me." Tasha looked at her brother, the man she had worshipped and enabled for her entire life. She looked at the handcuffs securing his wrists. She looked at the federal agents swarming the mansion. And then the ultimate betrayal occurred. The parasites began to feed on each other. "Help you," Tasha shrieked, her voice venomous and raw. "Are you out of your mind? Jamal and I are homeless because of you. My furniture is sitting on a sidewalk in Midtown. You dragged us into this. You told us you owned that company. You told us Simone was just a naive placeholder. You ruined my life, DeAndre. I am not calling anyone for you. I hope Simone takes every single thing you have left." She turned her back on her brother, sobbing hysterically as she ran down the driveway, frantically trying to explain to Jamal that they had no money, no house, and no future. The support system DeAndre had relied on to abuse me had completely collapsed. The enablers only loved him when the champagne was flowing and the rent was free. The second the money dried up, they abandoned him to the wolves without a single second of hesitation. Agent Miller placed a heavy hand on DeAndre's head, guiding him forcefully into the back of an unmarked black SUV. The door slammed shut, trapping him in the dark, caged interior. I watched the live feed as the remaining guests scattered like cockroaches when the kitchen lights are turned on. Valets scrambled to retrieve vehicles for the panicked investors. Caterers shoved their expensive equipment into loading vans, eager to escape the federal jurisdiction of a crime scene. The string quartet had long since vanished. Within 20 minutes, the grand anniversary party was reduced to a ghost town. The driveway was empty save for the flashing lights of the federal vehicles. Vivian Sterling stood on the front porch directing a team of locksmiths who had just arrived to change every single lock on the Buckhead mansion. She looked directly up at the hidden security camera I was monitoring from my penthouse, offering a single subtle nod of victory before turning back to her paperwork. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face in the darkened room. I placed my hands over my stomach, breathing in the quiet, absolute peace of total victory. The threat had been neutralized. The infection had been completely eradicated from my life. DeAndre had looked at me 24 hours ago and told me I was going to learn what it was like to survive in the real world without his credit cards. He had tried to bury me. He did not realize I was a seed planted deep in the fertile soil of generational wealth and unbreakable resilience. I reached out and powered down the security monitors. I did not need to watch him sit in the back of a police cruiser. I did not need to watch the agents box up his fake awards and his fraudulent financial ledgers. The kinetic explosive part of the war was over. Now came the long, suffocating silence of the consequences. I stood up, walked into my sprawling kitchen, and poured myself a tall glass of sparkling cider. I raised the glass to the empty room, offering a silent toast to my grandfather, to the legacy he built, and to the child I was preparing to bring into this world. We were safe. The empire was secure. But I knew DeAndre's desperation would not end in that holding cell. Men like him do not surrender gracefully. They barter, they beg, they attempt to manipulate the very people they abused, hoping that nostalgia or pity will grant them a pardon. He would use his one phone call to try and reach the woman he had discarded. He would try to invoke our vows, our history, and the baby he had called a disgusting burden. He was going to crawl on his hands and knees through the digital wires searching for a mercy I had surgically removed from my heart. I walked to my bedroom, pulling back the heavy silk sheets. I set my encrypted phone on the nightstand and turned the volume all the way up. I wanted to hear it ring tomorrow morning. I wanted to hear the exact tone of his utter defeat. I laid my head on the pillow, closing my eyes and letting the deep, restorative sleep wash over me. The trap had worked flawlessly. Tomorrow, I would wake up and deliver the final sentence. The morning sun filtered through the blackout curtains of my penthouse, casting a sharp beam of light across the foot of my bed. I woke up feeling remarkably rested. The chronic tension that had settled in my shoulders over the past year was completely gone. I stepped out of bed, wrapped myself in a silk robe, and walked into the kitchen to brew a cup of herbal tea. My encrypted phone sat on the marble counter, silent and waiting. It did not ring at 7. It did not ring at 8. I knew the federal processing system took time. They had to book him, fingerprint him, strip him of his custom velvet tuxedo, and issue him an orange jumpsuit. They had to take away his luxury watch and his leather shoes. They had to reduce the self-proclaimed king of Atlanta to an inmate number. At precisely 9:15, the phone vibrated against the marble. The caller ID displayed a generic federal holding facility routing number. I picked up the device, carried it into my home office, and set it on the stand in front of my primary monitor. Vivian Sterling had already arranged for a secure video link through the facility's administrative council, ensuring that I could look my husband in the eye when he delivered his inevitable plea. I pressed the green button to accept the incoming video call. The screen flickered to life. The stark fluorescent lighting of the visitation cubicle illuminated a man I barely recognized. DeAndre looked absolutely hollow. His perfectly faded haircut was disheveled. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of a sleepless night spent shivering on a concrete bench. I was wearing an oversized faded orange jumpsuit that swallowed his frame. The arrogance, the swagger, the booming voice that commanded attention at dinner parties had all been entirely erased. Simone DeAndre gasped the moment my face appeared on his screen. His voice was a ragged, desperate wheeze. Thank God. Simone, you have to help me. You have to call Vivian and tell her to drop the charges. This is a massive misunderstanding. They are talking about 10 years in a federal penitentiary. They took everything, Simone. They took my clothes, my phone, my dignity. You have to get me out of here. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, sipping my herbal tea. I did not say a word. I let the silence stretch across the digital connection, allowing him to feel the absolute weight of his powerlessness. Baby, please. DeAndre cried, tears actually spilling over his eyelashes and streaming down his face. I know I messed up. I know I handled things poorly. But I was under so much pressure. The firm was demanding higher margins. Tasha and Jamal were constantly begging me for handouts. Shayla manipulated me. She got into my head and made me think I needed a certain image to survive in this city. It was not me, Simone. That was not the man you married. You know my heart. You know I love you. We are a family. He pressed his hands against the thick plexiglass of the visitation booth, his shoulders heaving with dramatic sobs. Think about our baby. DeAndre pleaded, playing the ultimate card of desperation. Think about our child. You cannot let your baby grow up without a father. I want to be there for the ultrasounds. I want to build a legacy for our family. I will do whatever it takes. I will go to counseling. I will sign a postnuptial agreement. Just please post my bail. Please tell the federal agents that I had your verbal permission to secure that loan. We can fix this. We can go back to the way things were. I set my teacup down on the desk. The sheer audacity of his performance was fascinating. He was a cornered rat willing to say or do absolutely anything to escape the trap. But a rat is only dangerous if you leave the cage door open. Are you finished? I asked, my voice chillingly calm. DeAndre blinked, the tears momentarily halting as he tried to read my expression. Simone, I am begging you. I leaned forward, looking directly into the camera lens so he could see the absolute void in my eyes. You do not get to invoke the word family, DeAndre. You do not get to weaponize the child growing inside me to save yourself from federal prison. Let us rewind the clock exactly 36 hours. Let us go back to the home office in Buckhead. I handed you an ultrasound photo. I offered you the legacy you claim to care so much about. And what did you say to me? DeAndre swallowed hard, his eyes darting downward. Simone, I was angry. I was not thinking straight. I will tell you exactly what you said. I continued, my voice cutting through his excuses like a scalpel. You said my pregnancy was a disgusting trap. You said looking at me made your stomach turn. You told me that I was a liability dragging down your brand. You demanded that I pack my bags and get out of the house by midnight. You watched your sister call me a freeloader, and you agreed with her. You parroted your mistress around a mansion paid for by my family, and you tried to fund her cosmetic business, using stolen money from my grandfather's trust. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the reality of his actions settle heavily over the conversation. You thought you were a king, DeAndre. You thought you were a self-made titan of industry. But the truth is, you were nothing more than a well-dressed tenant living on my property. You played with my money. You played with my heart. And you assumed my silence meant I was weak. You mistook my humility for stupidity. You thought generational wealth was about leasing sports cars and buying expensive champagne. But true generational wealth is about protection. It is about building impenetrable fortresses around your bloodline to keep predators exactly like you out in the cold. DeAndre began to openly sob again, realizing that his manipulation tactics were completely failing. Simone, I have nothing. Marcus will not answer my calls. My firm officially fired me this morning. The public defender said the prosecutors have video evidence of the party and financial records of the embezzlement. I am ruined. Yes, you are, I agreed flatly. And you ruined yourself. Shayla posted a furious rant on her social media this morning exposing you as a fraud who bought her a stolen car. She has already fled to Miami with another man. Tasha and Jamal are currently sleeping on a friend's couch because their townhouse was legally repossessed. Your entire support system collapsed the moment your credit cards declined. You built your life on a foundation of lies, and now you get to live in the rubble. Please. DeAndre whispered, his head dropping until his forehead rested against the plexiglass. Have mercy on me. I looked at the ultrasound photo sitting on my desk, the tiny blurry shape of my child. I felt a fierce, undeniable surge of maternal protection. Mercy is reserved for people who show remorse before they are caught, I stated. You are only sorry because you are wearing an orange jumpsuit. You wrote your own sentence the moment you threw me out into the humid Atlanta night. My lawyer will be sending the divorce papers to the warden by Friday. You will never see a dime of my money again, and you will never meet this child. You have been entirely excised from my empire. Goodbye, DeAndre. Enjoy federal prison. Wait, Simone, do not hang up! DeAndre screamed, his voice rising in panic. Simone! I reached out and pressed the red button on my screen. The video feed snapped to black, cutting off his frantic begging instantly. The silence in my home office was beautiful. It was the sound of complete, unchallenged sovereignty. The heavy, toxic anchor I had been carrying for 5 years was finally gone. I was free. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sprawling city of Atlanta. The sun was rising higher, bathing the skyscrapers in brilliant, warm light. My grandfather had built a legacy that spanned generations, a quiet, powerful empire designed to withstand any storm. He had taught me the value of patience, the importance of corporate shielding, and the absolute necessity of striking back with overwhelming legal force when someone threatens your kingdom. Over the next few months, the fallout was spectacular. DeAndre pleaded guilty to federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. He was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary, his reputation entirely obliterated. The Internal Revenue Service seized every asset Shayla attempted to hide, leaving her with massive tax penalties. Tasha and Jamal filed for bankruptcy, completely unable to sustain their lifestyle without the silent subsidies they had grown accustomed to taking from me. As for me, I finalized my divorce and took full public control of the Sterling Vanguard Trust. I no longer hid behind proxy managers or shell companies to protect a fragile man's ego. I stepped into the boardroom as the sole managing director, expanding our commercial real estate portfolio and launching a philanthropic foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers and female entrepreneurs. I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl, wrapping her in the unconditional love and security she deserved. She will grow up knowing the true meaning of wealth. She will know that power does not come from designer labels or loud boasting at dinner parties. It comes from intelligent strategy and the courage to sever ties with anyone who disrespects your crown. Generational wealth is not just about the money you pass down. It is about the wisdom you impart to ensure your bloodline is never victimized by opportunistic predators. I had to learn that lesson the hard way through betrayal and heartbreak, but the victory was entirely mine. I protected my empire and I secured my future. Have you ever watched an arrogant, entitled person lose everything in the blink of an eye because they dared to underestimate the quiet strength of the person standing behind them? Have you ever had to use the cold, hard logic of the law to teach a painful lesson to a toxic partner? Share your stories of resilience and vindication in the comments below. Never let anyone dim your light to make themselves shine brighter. Protect your peace, protect your assets, and always remember to secure your crown. Thank you for listening to my journey. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.